Hi, everyone. Hey, everybody. Looks like we're going to have quite a crowd tonight. I hope so. Although I know how busy everybody must be nowadays with the holidays almost upon us. We'll wait a couple. Well, I'll fill the next minute while we're waiting for everybody to come in by saying that the reason we're having this little get together tonight is that we are getting so many travel queries and trip requests for 2022, as well as still for the holidays this year. And it is just clear that a lot of people still have a lot of confusion. There are a lot of misperceptions out there. We thought we would take advantage of this opportunity to kind of set the record straight and help people out, especially before the holiday craziness. You know, Billy and Brooke and I we were just talking about how, you know, during the holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas, while it's a very busy time for us because while everybody else is like relaxing over Thanksgiving weekend, they're with their families all talking about where they're going to travel next year. So always over Thanksgiving and over Christmas, we get so many travel questions coming in, so many trip requests from all of you guys who are gathered together with family and friends talking about where you're going to go and asking us all sorts of questions. So we thought, you know, we can try to give you some guidance now and answer some of the questions now, so that and maybe we can all go out and have a little bit of a calmer Thanksgiving and Christmas this year. In any case, so let me quickly introduce Billy and so Billy Cohen, who is our content director. And Billy, do you want to say a quick hello?
Hi, everyone. Happy holidays.
And Brooke Wilkinson.
Hey, everyone.
We, you know, Brooke and Billy, they're like me, they're fellow journalists and editors who have been traveling internationally during this pandemic. We all have been. Brooke has been, Brooke, who's based in San Francisco, has been in the Maldives, in Dubai, in Zimbabwe and Botswana during the pandemic, and Billy, who is based in New York City there with her beautiful brick wall behind her. She's just back from Egypt, but she was also in Europe over the summer. She was in Greece and France and Spain. I was in Turkey, and the fact is, so we've been traveling a lot. I mean, not only during the pandemic, but really since lockdown ended in June of 2020, because, you know, a lot of people needed to make essential trips. I did too. And so a lot of people were asking us for that kind of advice back then. The thing is, we know that it is very possible to travel safely and responsibly and meaningfully during, I mean, Billy and Brooke and I, like, none of us have got, you know, thank goodness, none of us have gotten COVID. None of our family members have gotten COVID. And it's because of, you know, we've traveled very safely, you know, always doing the testing, the quarantining, getting vaccinated, all the rest of it. There's a lot of misinformation and panic in the media and in newspaper articles nowadays about travel as regards COVID. You know, I think that news articles, they're interviewing people who maybe made some mistakes, weren't that wise, didn't use the right sources for information. And the result is that a lot of people are reading these articles and getting very, very sort of like alarmist, you know, worried about, like, and panicking about what might happen to them. The fact is, we know that there are so many people who are doing it right. They're out there taking smart precautions, you know, making smart decisions, having successful trips, coming home so thrilled that they took advantage of the moment. We're hearing from these travelers every day. Billy, I'm sure, is putting in the chat box, you know, what we're hearing back from those travelers every day as they return from trips. And, you know, as proof that travel today can be safe and responsible and meaningful and not, you know, what we're reading about in so many news articles that are just throwing the fear of God into people. But it is also true that travel is more challenging nowadays. It's certainly less predictable. You have less control over some elements of it. It's certainly more expensive because of restricted capacity. More can go wrong in terms of border openings and closures, changing entry requirements, false positives in testing, changing testing rules for different countries. It is certainly a time when it really helps to have a local fixer who knows the lay of the land. Thank goodness we have our WOW list for just that. I wanted to share some strategies for choosing where to go. As I say, we get so many trip requests and questions every day. A lot of people are saying, oh, in 2022, I'm going to get, and they're naming like 5 European countries they want to combine in one trip. And Brooke and I are like at the other end of these questions saying, oh my goodness, what are they thinking? Here are some basic strategies for like how to approach travel, how to choose where to go. So first of all, you want to consider the vaccination rate in a place. Like, is it high? Is it higher than where you live in the United States? You want to consider the COVID caseload, as particularly the rate of local spread in the country or the area you're considering going to, and compare that with your rate back home. I mean, for instance, a good statistic to look at is how many daily cases per 100,000 people. Look at the country, and you can find this information. I think Billy is putting right now into the chat box some good online resources for getting this information. But look at how many cases, new cases per day per 100,000 people in the country and in the areas within the country you're thinking of going to, compared with in the United States or what you're used to back in your own neighborhood back home. Because some people they'll look at a State Department, like see that Belize or another country is at level 4 and like really kind of misunderstand what that means and think, oh my goodness, that they think things that aren't true. You need to, I mean, a lot of the United States would be well beyond level 4 if the State Department had to grade it. So, you want to compare that vaccination rate and local rate of spread, where you're thinking of going versus where you're coming from. Consider how much of your trip will be in the open air and socially distanced. There are a lot of places out there where it is actually very easy to spend practically all day long in the open air, eating all your meals outdoors, spending all your time outdoors, or being in places where it's actually very easy to socially distance. And even if you don't think it's easy to socially distance, if you have the right trip designer, like who knows the local lay of the land, arranging things for you, you can remain socially distanced the whole time. When you're looking at State Department advisories, I just spoke a couple of minutes ago about the levels and what they really mean. Think about the fact that, first of all, those levels, those advisories are covering the entirety of a country, not just the areas where you're going to be going. I mean, think about the entirety of the United States and how there are many pockets of where the vaccination rates are low, caseloads are high, versus other places where you might be from where it's a completely different story. So when you're looking at those State Department advisories, remember, it's talking about the entire country, not the places where you're going to be going necessarily, the safer places. And also look at the date when they were published, because a lot of them date back to June or May or sometime when the situation was very different. Again, look at a country like Costa Rica and look at what the statistics are there versus where you're coming from. And you'll see it's actually probably much lower. The situation is safer than where you're coming from. There's also, it's important to know about looking at domestic travel versus international travel. This past year and this past summer in particular, oh my goodness, a lot of people just assumed, well, I'll be safer staying within the United States. And they filled the hotels and resorts, and a lot of service issues, a lot of problems, very crowded national parks, people not able to get into restaurants for meals during their vacations, a lot of issues in the United States that did not occur internationally. It was not the same situation at all. I want to encourage everybody to think about traveling to other countries. It is not only is it easier than you might think, it really feels safer. Like literally everyone I've talked to who's come back from a trip overseas had such a better time than the people who stayed within the United States. Part of it is, think about just the airline flight alone. If you're on a flight to a country overseas, everyone on that flight has complied with whatever the entry requirements are for that country you're going to. So everyone on board, almost always has been either vaccinated or they were just tested within, say, 48 hours before the flight. That doesn't happen on domestic. On domestic flights, you could be sitting next to anybody. Anybody can board. There isn't that kind of testing, right? But so flying internationally actually feels a lot safer to many people. Also, domestically, I give the example of the hotel buffet. Domestically, the money people who are in charge of the hotels, they kind of said, okay, well, it's going to cost too much money to try to make the buffet safe, so we're canceling it. So this means that may take longer to get food at your hotel. That's very different from what happened in many overseas places, like in Italy, at a 5-star hotel, 4-star hotel in Italy. Instead, they say, oh, well, let's make the buffet safe. So they'll put up plexiglass and they won't have everybody serving themselves. There's somebody behind the plexiglass who's serving you the food. They figured out how to make things in a hotel safe, as opposed to just shutting down that part of the hotel and saying, sorry, you can't, that's out of commission. So when you think about where to go, think about, going overseas to those places that have, we hear from people who are saying, where can I go where testing isn't required? And Brooke and Billy and I are like, why? I want to go to some place where testing is required because I want everybody else. I want all the other tourists who are on that plane with me and going to that other country to be tested as well. Like, the more requirements, the safer the environment. And it's so much easier to get tested and to fulfill those entry requirements than you might imagine. A lot of people, I think, again, because of all the news articles for so many months now about how, it's so hard to find a rapid test in the United States compared with in Europe. All those scenes of people, and stories about people waiting in line and you can't find stuff in the stores. I've had no problem ordering tests online. I've used them many times for many different trips, both domestically and internationally. It's not as hard as many articles seem to paint. When you're thinking about where you're going to go, I really recommend nowadays sticking with one country instead of combining countries. Again, we've got the people who say, oh, I want to go to Europe summer of 2022, and I want to combine Italy and France and Spain and England. It's like, wait a second, you are asking for so many potential logistical, all those, the entry requirements, the testing requirements. There's so much to do just within Italy, just within France. Think about, making your trip to a single country, taking a nonstop flight. We've just published an article about new airline routes for 2022. Airline routes that have just started now and that also are going to be starting next year. Nonstop flights, really, can make your life a lot easier by, not having to transit in some other country where, things could go wrong just in terms of it just makes everything easier, as I'm sure you know. Generally speaking, we found that those countries, those destinations that have been dealing with travelers during COVID for a long time, the ones that have been open for a very long time, I'm talking about like Turkey, Croatia, Mexico, Belize, the countries that have been open for, I don't know, 16, 17 months now, have figured it out. They have figured out how to handle travelers and keep them safe during COVID, probably to a greater degree than the ones that are just opening up. They're still working out the kinks. So, consider that, the going with places that have figured this out. Because prices are so high, they are a lot higher, virtually everywhere. That's one thing about the places that have been open for a long time, is that they've become so popular that sometimes prices can be very, very high. If you need a deal, that's when I would say look at the countries that have just opened. The ones that are just opening now, for instance, Thailand, Cambodia, Fiji, the ones that are just starting to open. Yes, there might be a few kinks, there might be a bit more testing required, but you are definitely going to find lower prices if that's what you're looking for. Look at the new airline routes that have just started, because that's when airlines offer introductory fares when on those new routes, and they're nonstops. And again, I would not discount the places that have the stricter requirements to get in, because again, that's how you stay safe. And I mean, like when we were going to Turkey, I took my family to Turkey over the summer, and testing is not required to go to Turkey. We're vaccinated, and so we didn't have to be tested. And yet, of course, we're going to test ourselves before leaving for a foreign country. Who's going to fly to a foreign country without knowing that they're COVID free, right? You don't want to arrive in a foreign country and then find out you had COVID. So if you're going to test yourselves anyway, as my family was certainly going to, think about that. Think about the fact that you're probably going to be testing yourselves anyway before flying to a foreign country. But so we, of course, we did pre-trip testing. We did testing before the return. We took the antigen rapid tests with us, and we did it from our hotel room online. All we needed basically was our, an internet connection, our electronic devices, and the tests, and we took them in our hotel room to come back. And one reason we felt so safe in Turkey was that, well, first we were in a private boat along the coast. And when we stopped in ports, we were alone with fabulous Roman ruins, charming beach towns, all these fabulous places along the Turkish coast, and so few people there. But then when we were in Istanbul, of course, there were a ton of people in Istanbul, but we were outdoors the whole time. Again, I mean, in Istanbul, you eat outdoors. You stay in hotels along the Bosphorus where you have a balcony, and it's like there's the Bosphorus right in front of you, and it just feels very breezy. So even a place, I mean, my point is, even a place that's like a big buzzing city where you think, oh my God, how can I possibly stay safe in such a city with so many thousands of people in it? Well, by staying in a hotel on the river with the balcony. It's like you open the door and it lets in the fresh air. And before I pass the baton over to Brooke, I just want to talk a little bit about last minute holiday availability. We have been getting, a lot of people understandably waited until the last minute. Right now is last minute to try to figure out where to go for the Christmas, New Year's, the festive season. And it's understandable because, you never know what's going to happen until the last minute nowadays. There's too much uncertainty. But the fact is, so many people did book because they felt like they could finally get away for the holidays, that prices are astronomical in a lot of places, especially the places that are sunny and warm near the United States. So we've come up with some other options for you to consider, places that still have not just random availability, of a few hotel rooms, I mean, that have the availability to get a total wow trip, like with the fabulous, most charming hotels, still have rooms, the savviest local guides who are going to get you into the places that normally are off limits to the public. All of that can happen in certain destinations over the holidays. And I'm sure Billy right now is putting in the chat box that article, but just briefly, it includes Italy. People returning from Italy are having like Italy is one of the places to go right now. We're hearing nothing but awesomeness about what they're doing in Italy, especially with the fact that, indoor places feel so safe because everybody entering must be vaccinated. You have to show your vaccination card to get into these indoor venues and restaurants and everything in Italy. Same in France. And so it makes people feel very safe there. Israel, Israel just opened to individual travelers very recently. Yes, they have testing requirements. They're a relatively large number of hoops to jump through, but if you can jump through them, what an amazing opportunity to be in Israel during the holidays with this is the one year it won't be jam-packed with tour groups and the tourist masses. That's an amazing opportunity to take advantage of Israel this coming holiday time. Europe's Christmas markets is an interesting thing. There is availability. Right now we're seeing spikes in Germany and Austria, but on the other hand, there really are ways to keep yourself safe. And there are other, there are also Christmas markets in Italy, in Northern Italy, in France, and a number of them that are staying this year. They're staying open later. Many of them are staying open until January 6th. Normally they close around December 24th. So that's another opportunity. Safaris in East Africa, in Rwanda and Kenya specifically. How often can you get gorilla permits in Rwanda at the last minute, like for the holidays? Never. So that's something to take advantage of. Also Thailand, which just recently opened. And I mean, of course, they've got, tropical islands and the warmth that you may be looking for, and Turkey. And having been to Turkey, I've been to Turkey actually 5 times now. I was once there in January. Yes, it was chilly and there was actually some snow, but because there were so few people there, it was an amazing time. I mean, those merchants in the bazaars were hungry and they were willing to, lowered prices by a lot. I mean, Turkey over the holidays really should be considered because to be there when there are so few crowds is a special experience. In any case, when you're traveling during COVID, you do need, as in so much of life during COVID, you need a plan B, you need a plan C, you need a plan D. It really helps. It's more important than ever to use those local experts. They live there, they know it. You don't have to come up with a plan B and a plan C if they're doing it for you and taking care of all the logistics and sparing you all the problems and making sure you have a great vacation. And so I strongly recommend using the WOW list nowadays more than ever. Okay, and now I am going to pass the baton to Brooke. Brooke, who is in San Francisco area. And Brooke, why don't you, many of you know Brooke because she answers your questions. Every day.
Yes. Thanks, Wendy. Hi, everyone. And just to let you know, I see we're getting some questions in the Q&A box. That's great. We'll get to those in the second half of the hour. Billy's putting lots of useful links in the chat box to all the articles we've written about these subjects in the last couple of weeks. So any questions you'd like us to answer, use the Q&A box. So Wendy asked me to talk a little bit about the choices I've made about travel during COVID. I've done more traveling than most during the pandemic, but I also want to say I've been more careful than most when I've been at home, and some people might be confused by that. I think it makes sense. My son is 10, so he only got his first vaccine shot 2 weeks ago, so he still hasn't been able to have a play date with anyone except for his pod buddy. And I've been living and traveling as if I'm unvaccinated. I haven't even eaten in a restaurant indoors since March 2020, but I have been comfortable traveling and safe traveling internationally during COVID, primarily because I knew that I could follow the same protocols when I was traveling that I do at home. I mean, we've all kind of gotten used to what we do now, masking, social distancing, being outdoors, and I've been able to do that successfully traveling. As Wendy mentioned, I've taken 2 trips, one to the Maldives and Dubai in October of 2020, and another to Botswana and Zimbabwe via South Africa this past July. And in both cases, apart from airports, airplanes, and a few car rides, I was never in enclosed spaces with other people. And that was just the nature of those open air destinations. It wasn't because they changed things around because of COVID. These are places where in 2019, your trip would have been all outdoors anyway. It was a private island resort in the Maldives where I stayed at an overwater bungalow, a 300,000 acre wilderness reserve in Botswana that was shared among just 2 small safari camps. So the trips there felt very much as they would have before COVID, and you can still have those same experiences in many places. On both of those trips, I made sure that I had private accommodations with a lot of ventilation and a lot of room. I actually had a private pool in each of those places. I have taken domestic trips during COVID, and I know what it's like to be stuck in a cramped hotel room when you don't feel comfortable going into the lobby, and it's no fun. So I really look carefully at where I'm going to be staying and spending my time when I'm in a hotel abroad. In both of those international trips, I was able to eat out all my meals outdoors. A few cases I had meals in my room. And again, that's how it would have been before COVID. All of my activities were outdoors. Most of them were private. I went snorkeling in the Maldives. I went scuba diving for the first time on that trip. In Dubai, I was driving in the sand dunes. In Southern Africa, of course, it's amazing, amazing wildlife viewing in the Okavango Delta and elsewhere, and all with no one else around. A big reason that I chose these particular places, again, is that they all had sort of a COVID bubble around them. In each place, the staff actually live on site at the resorts or the hotels, and they have to be tested before they arrive. And as Wendy mentioned, the travelers are being tested or showing proof of vaccination when they come into the country. So there weren't really many opportunities for the COVID to be introduced into these bubbles around the resorts, which is really calming. So we get a lot of questions, as Wendy said, about that testing before a trip. At this point, all but a few countries require proof of either full vaccination or a recent test in order to enter, a recent negative test. Many countries require both. They want to see both vaccination and a recent negative test. We're keeping track of every country's entry requirements on the website. I'm sure Billy's putting that link in the chat box. So testing is another thing that we're asked about a lot. I've been tested a bunch of times now, both in the US and abroad. I've even had tests transported by ship in the Maldives and by helicopter in Botswana. And I can tell you it's much easier to get quick results elsewhere than it is here in the US. So, if you're thinking, oh gosh, I have to wait 4 days for a test in the US, how am I ever going to find a test in the Okavango Delta? I'm here to tell you that apparently it turns out that it's quite easy. So we have an article full of in-person and mail-in options for testing because there are quick options in the US. They do exist. It's possible. And the planners on the WOW list can arrange for quick and convenient COVID tests during your trip. As many of you probably know, you do still need a negative test to come back into the US. So you'll be tested at some point toward the end of your trip. And that's easy to do pretty much anywhere in the world. I also want to talk about how to choose flights. Wendy's mentioned that nonstops are really key these days. I heard Dr. Fauci say last week that airline travel we're seeing that it's just really very safe. But there are additional strategies that I used to kind of make myself feel even more comfortable. When I went to the Maldives, I opted to fly via Dubai because at the time, the United Arab Emirates was requiring that even transiting passengers show a negative test. So it gave me that extra level of confidence that everyone on the plane would have been recently tested. And then I paid an extra $500 to have reserved seats in a row of 2 that they have at the back of the plane, not 3, so that my husband and I would know we wouldn't have a seatmate right next to us. When I was headed to Africa this summer, I flew on United's new nonstop from Newark to Johannesburg. At the time, there were a lot of changing entry requirements in Europe, and I just didn't want to get caught by a last minute change and not have the right materials or tests at the right window or anything. And so those are things to keep in mind when you're choosing a destination and finding flights that will work. Wendy talked also about looking at COVID cases and vaccination rates. On both of my trips, I was actually headed to countries that had relatively high COVID numbers at that time. It didn't worry me because I looked at where those cases were, which was in the cities and all those in both situations, and where I'd be going. Again, a private island resort, a vast wilderness reserve in the Okavango Delta, and that set my mind at ease. Again, also being able to be outdoors and masked when necessary. Wendy mentioned State Department and CDC advisories, and as she said, they are often outdated, but they also contain very few country-specific details. So what I find really useful is to talk to an expert who knows the country, and as I say, can tell me where the cases are. Are they in a city? Are they in this part of the country? Who's getting vaccinated? The places like Turkey are actually vaccinating their tourism workers preferentially, so that you know that the people who you're interacting with on your trip will be vaccinated. And we get a lot of questions about travel insurance, probably not surprisingly. There are policies that will cover you if you get sick with COVID before your trip and you need to cancel, or if you get sick during your trip and have medical expenses. But there are not policies that will allow you to cancel and will reimburse you if you cancel because of fear of COVID. If you do want a policy that does something like that, there's something called a cancel for any reason policy, or a CFAR policy. And so you can do just that. You can, for any reason, up to 48 hours before your trip starts, you can say, nope, I'm not going, and they will reimburse you. The downsides are that they reimburse generally about 75%, no more than that, of your trip costs. You're not going to get all your money back, and they are more expensive than a typical travel insurance policy. So we've got links about travel insurance in the chat too. So those are some of the factors that I've considered in the past, and that as I look forward to my travels in 2022, what I'm thinking about. And those are what we think about here at WendyPerrin.com. As Wendy said, every day we're hearing from people and helping them figure out the right country that's going to fit their parameters, that's going to give them the right level of confidence and safety. Our travelers have taken hundreds of trips since COVID emerged, and we've had not a single positive case. And I think that speaks volumes to the carefulness with which these trips are happening. And no one's ever been able to guarantee your safety on a trip, even before COVID, but I do believe that you can be as safe traveling as you are at home. And I just want to remind, many of you may already know, especially if I've corresponded with you, that we have an Ask Wendy feature on our website in the black navigation bar at the top of the page. And we give out personalized trip recommendations through that questionnaire. So if you have questions about an upcoming trip, feel free to write to us there. We have, as Wendy said, reviews coming in from travelers every day, and that's telling us, that's giving us the intel we need to know what places, where it's possible to plan safe trips, and who are the planners who are doing that successfully. And now I'm going to turn it over to Billy, who's going to talk about her own travels recently.
Hi, everyone. I know I'm putting a ton of links in the chat box, so I just wanted to say, if you're not seeing them or not paying attention to them, or they're just too many, don't worry. Everything is on our site. We have a COVID-19 section. We have an Ask Wendy button. And we also have a newsletter that the three of us put together twice a week to make sure that you have the latest intel and info, so you can sign up for that as well. So I want to talk about my trips. I went to Greece and France and Spain at the beginning of June, right when those all opened. And I also just got back from 2 weeks in Egypt. And Like Brooke and Wendy have said, I felt safe in those places for a couple of reasons. One, I had well listers who planned my trips and who were accessible by phone or WhatsApp throughout. So I had all my questions answered. I was also in hotels that had balconies and windows that opened. In Greece, everything is outside. The sites that you see, the historical places, the beaches, and all the little tavernas that you could want to go to, whether you're in Athens or on any island, it's all outside. So it's like, it was the perfect first place for me to be coming out of the pandemic. And then I was in Paris and Spain, and even when I was inside, the crowds were minimal because I was there right as those countries opened. And so I couldn't believe how uncrowded it was. And then in Egypt, again, nearly everything is outside. It is an outdoor museum similar to Turkey. And I also spent a chunk of my trip on a private dahabeah, which is an open air small sailboat with 6 cabins, and it felt incredibly safe. Not only because we were outside all the time, the whole top floor of the boat is an open deck with lounge chairs and so much food. So there's a fresh breeze all the time, but also because we were in a small ship, and that enabled us to access sites that other tourists couldn't get to. Because the larger standard Nile cruises, they're bigger boats and they can't dock everywhere. And also when we were going to some of the temples or areas that were very popular, we could go before or after those big cruise ships came, because they're on a pretty set itinerary. And with dahabeah, we have a little more flexibility. So so all those trips, they felt very comfortable to me. But I wanted to talk about two important things that I learned from all these COVID era trips that I wanted to share. I thought would be helpful as you guys are thinking about 2022 trips. And the first is, it's so great to be one of the first people back to a place. I got such a warm welcome everywhere I went, from local people, from people I met in shops, different restaurants, random people on the street. There was like this immediate common ground, this bond. Like, I don't know, maybe because we'd all been through the same thing, this sort of shared, very difficult global experience, and we were all emerging from it, and we were so eager to reconnect and like feel this joy again. You could see I was getting so excited. But it made these trips so meaningful in a way that I hadn't expected, and I couldn't have imagined it. It was like this really nice flip side to all the bad parts of the pandemic and the lockdown. For example, and I wrote about this in Barcelona, I walked into an espadrille shop, the shop that hand makes espadrilles. They've been doing it for 100 years. And I start chatting with one of the workers, and we have our masks on. But within like a couple of minutes, she realizes I'm from America, my terrible broken Spanish. And her face lights up. I can see it. Even with her mask on, I can see the smile right through it. And next thing I know, she's calling to her coworkers in the back, and they're clapping for me, and they're coming over, and we're chatting and we're laughing. And it turns out they had not seen an American tourist since before the pandemic. They hadn't seen any overseas tourists since before the pandemic. They'd only seen local Spanish tourists. So having me in their shop was like this signal that things were returning to normal. And they were really, really excited about that and really grateful. And it opened this door for us. I spent an hour in that shop, hanging out with them. I learned how to make espadrilles. I learned about the history of the shop. I bought a pair of shoes, of course. And it was just this really nice opportunity that I wouldn't have had otherwise. This shop is usually super busy, like 50 people would come in an hour. And when I was there, 2 or 3 did. So it was this really great opportunity. And then like somewhat similarly in Paris, I got there the day that France opened to international travelers. And it was also the day that Paris lifted its curfew. People had to have gone home at like, I can't remember what time, but early. And now the curfew was lifted so they could stay out and like have a normal dinner. And everyone I spoke to, I went out for dinner that night, everyone I spoke to they felt so free. You know, that I kept hearing people say things like, I have my life back again. So there was this joy that was happening. And when I went out to dinner on one corner in Saint-Germain, there was this impromptu dance party that had happened. Someone came out and there was a band playing music, and there were maybe 15, 20 people who were all just dancing together, strangers. And then everybody who walked by that corner came through and danced a little as they walked. It was just like, it was wonderful. And so I keep using the word joyful, but it really was. And it was because it was new and the country was reopening and they were super happy about it. And in Egypt, it was similar. There was that joy, but I had it on a more intimate experience. Like we spent on the Dahabeeyah that I mentioned. It was me and my friends and our guide, and then this other family from Belgium, a family of 4, also vaccinated. And our guides were vaccinated too, because like Brooke mentioned, also in Egypt, all the tourism professionals have to be vaccinated. So it felt super safe. But we would stay up late into the night, all of us, just sitting around the table, playing games, laughing, telling stories, getting to know each other. And it was because we were all just so happy to be back out in the world and meeting people. And for our guides, it was some of the first time that they had been out since the pandemic. So it was just this really enthusiastically warm welcome. And it's not just me who's having these experiences. We are hearing this kind of thing from our readers too. Then all the reviews that they're sending us, it's a very special time to be traveling because of the way people are feeling and because of this shared experience. And we are hearing that people are having these really meaningful, really authentic person-to-person connections. And like I said, we all deserve it because it's the flip side to what's been a really difficult past couple of years. So my tip for you is, so it was a long way around, is try to get out there before the summer, before the big summer rush. Like Wendy said, things are booking up really fast for 2022, and it's going to be a busy summer, especially in Europe. So think about going in March or early spring. So you can not only not have as many of the crowds, but you can also have the opportunity to experience these one-on-one moments. You're still getting that warm welcome because the shopkeepers and the restaurant people, they're all still eager and hungry to see you. So it'll open up possibilities that wouldn't have been there before the pandemic. And then the second thing that I learned is go to the places that are just opening. Like Wendy said, yes, some of them will be working out the kinks, but it will be worth it for the benefits that you'll get. And that was my experience. You'll get the reward of being the first people, the limited crowds. There's no one in the Mona Lisa room in the Louvre when I went. There was very few people in some of the most popular temples and tombs in Egypt. You'll get this warm welcome, this enthusiastic embrace from people. And in the places that are just opening, those are the places where that wall between tourist and local, it'll come down. That's what I experienced. So places like Fiji and Thailand and Cambodia, those are opening. And I can only imagine Cambodia without the crowds. I was in Siem Reap a couple of years ago, and just thinking about seeing the temples of Angkor Wat without the usual crowd, it's thrilling. So I think there is an upside to the world reopening and us getting back out there and taking advantage of this really special time. And remember, you won't be alone. You won't be unprepared. You'll be so super prepared because you'll have a wow lister in your corner, and they'll prep you with all the intel that you need before and during. I had all the answers I needed. They'll help you with the test. They'll tell you what's open. They'll make sure you have whatever pass you need. If you need a pass in France, for example, they'll make sure you have that. We hear that over and over again from our readers, that they have that support and that a lot of the things that they thought would be hassles just weren't at all. So those are my 2 things. And I see that a lot of people had a lot of questions. And just a reminder, if you put them in the chat boxes, you can just go ahead and add them to the Q&A because we'll take questions from there. And that's it.
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in here with some of these questions. We got a question about the best place to look for requirements for entrance to different countries, and I can tell you I'm losing sleep at certain days keeping track of all of that. But though now that much of the world is open, it's nice. Things have quieted down. There are not quite as many changes. We have an article on our website where you will find the exact entry requirements for each country. And for as terms of entrance back to the US, if you are vaccinated, you just need a COVID test within the previous 3 days. And that can be an antigen test, it can be a rapid test, does not have to be a PCR test. If you're unvaccinated, you need that same test, but in just the previous 1 day before you fly back to the US. Okay, other questions? We got a lot of questions. Oh, Billy, did you want to
jump in, Brooke? Sorry, I don't know if it's on there, but someone in the chat earlier had asked about the antigen self-test. Mm-hmm. And so I thought now might be a good time because both Wendy and I took those. And it was, so my side, it was super easy. I did it in Egypt. I opened the thing, logged online. I think within 25 minutes, I had taken the complete test, talked to the person on the computer, and got my results, and they send it right to your phone or your email. So it was very easy for me. Wendy, did you have the similar experience?
Yeah, I mean, basically we went to emed.com, ordered the Abbott Binax Now tests. They send you a pack of 6 of them. I ordered a bunch because we had 4 family members who were all doing this. You carry with you basically 2 tests, one that you take and then one sort of as a spare in case you need it. And they're small, you throw them in your suitcase. And then when you're ready to do it, you just, you kind of call up. I did it on my laptop. You talk to the person as the health technician. Yeah, I mean, in 25 minutes, basically you have the result of your test emailed to you, and then you have the front desk printed out and you take it to the airport. So you can do that easily within, again, you get the results right away. So that takes no more than half an hour. But then also, in many countries, it's also faster and easier to get a PCR test from local, doctors or nurses who either, around the corner from your hotel or they come to your hotel. It's a lot easier in so many places, especially Western Europe, than it is in the United States.
And someone asked about expiration dates. Those kits do have expiration dates. I mean, they don't expire as quickly as your eggs, but you don't want to buy, a dozen kits today for a trip you're going to take a year from now, but just, do take a look at the expiration date before you go.
And to clarify, you can't just buy a self-test at your local pharmacy and bring that with you. It is actually the same test is in there, but what you're paying for and what you need is the umbrella health organization that's going to certify the results. So that's what Wendy was speaking of when she said eMed. Like you can buy those Binax Abbott tests, I think even at like a CVS, but you have to do it through this process in order to get the official negative result. You can't just do it yourself and then, show the airport your swab.
Yeah, no, you need the printout, the paper test result to take with you to show, at the airport when you're checking in for your flight.
Yeah.
Someone asked also about getting a test within 48 to 72 hours before you arrive at your destination, especially when flying to Europe. So this is, a test before you leave on your trip. What the articles that Billy put in the chat, we have a list of labs around the country that do quick turnaround tests. I've used a urgent care clinic in New York for both of my trips, as I happen to be leaving from there, and they actually do 15-minute result PCR tests. So there are places where you can get quick tests. They're not free, as if you want a public health clinic test that's going to take a couple days, and maybe it's free, but if you pay for quick results, that is possible. And if you have long layovers and you're worried about that window, one thing I've heard people do is that they take one test several days before they're going to leave the United States, get the results of that to know that they're negative, and then they take another test just before they leave, knowing that they'll receive the results while they're traveling en route. So they've left knowing that they're negative, but then they'll have the last minute results to show when they're en route. So depending on when you need to show your results, that's another option that you can do. Let's see, what else do we have questions about?
One person asks, what would you combine with Rwanda if you want to go to Africa for 2 to 3 weeks? And I just want to say Kenya. A lot of people nowadays are combining Kenya. People have been going to Kenya since before there was a vaccine, and have felt safe because it's very easy to have a safe safari in Kenya. And so a lot of people are combining Kenya and Rwanda. So, and the safari experts are smart enough, even though the rule usually is just do one country at a time. With safaris, it's a little bit different because the great safari experts who are arranging your safari, they help with all those logistics. So it's easier to combine countries in a way because you're putting it in the, I mean, wouldn't you say that, Brooke? I mean, you did that.
Yeah, and as you say, they're smart about which countries to combine and the right order to do it. And all of the good safari camps, they have nurses coming in on a daily basis, probably to do tests. So they're all familiar with that. Yeah.
I love this question about South America. Brooke, do you want to comment on that? Because I feel like the safety of traveling to South America, especially Colombia, but I mean, like a number of South American countries, you know, the situation was so bad many months ago. And I think a lot of people still think, oh my gosh, South America, but it's gotten so much better now.
Yeah, I mean, the COVID numbers are way down there. Chile and Argentina just opened this month, so that's exciting. This is the beginning of their summer, so this is the beginning of peak season for that part of the world, and they've just opened in November. We had a traveler in Colombia recently who had a wonderful trip, and these are places, I mean, when you think of the top sites in Chile and Argentina, we're talking about Patagonia, we're talking about the Atacama Desert. These are huge, wide open places where it's very easy to social distance and be outdoors. Brazil was a place that did not have great numbers for a long time, and COVID cases are way down there. And there are also lots of open air places in Brazil. I mean, it's known for its cities, but you know, you can do the cities safely and then be out in, you know, Iguazu Falls or the Amazon, places like that. One thing I have heard about when I bring up the Amazon, I think one thing you may not want to include in your trip to South America right now are visits to indigenous villages, not just South America, but elsewhere. Those are sometimes places where vaccination rates are lower and the infrastructure is very minimal. And so the travel planners I've been talking to are being very careful about or sending travelers there because they don't want to to have negative consequences when there's so little infrastructure available.
There's a question here. I guess somebody won a Cabo condo stay in a raffle. Congratulations, that's nice. Will WOW travel experts help book excursions, activities, tea times, etc., without booking a hotel through them? I would certainly try, you know, I mean, each WOW list travel expert is a little different in terms of how they work, what they're able to book or not, and sort of their business model. Some will do that, some won't do that. And actually it's changed over time. I do think it's worth trying. Brooke, what do you think? You think it's worth trying?
Yeah, I would invite that traveler to write to us, and we can connect them to someone. If there's someone who can do that, we'll let them know personally. So depending on the destination, you know, the answer depends.
Yeah, and so when we say write to us, what we mean is go to the website and click on that where it says, if you go to WendyPerrin.com and it says get a personalized trip recommendation in the top at the top right, just click there, fill out the questionnaire, and we'll get back to you and let you know the best option for that.
We have a question about, is it too soon to book 2023 trips to Italy and to Alaska? I would say it's not too soon to start the conversation. 2022 is going to be a huge year for travel. We're already hearing from people who were locked out of their first choice, you know, whether that was a European river cruise and they're already all booked up, or you know, something else. So those people are going to start looking at 2023. So it is smart to start thinking about it if that's the time you have available to travel. One reason you might not be able to actually book a trip is that hotels don't always set their prices this far in advance. But also I would just say, if you can travel in 2022, especially to places like Italy and Alaska that are just perennially very popular destinations, if there's any way to do that sooner rather than later, I would try to do that.
here's well, I guess this is a question for Billy. Billy, about Egypt in November 2022. Sandy wants to know if you felt comfortable on your Nile cruise. I mean, you've spoken a bit about that. I think that was your favorite part of it. Wait, Billy, I think you're muted.
Oh no, I think we lost her audio somehow.
Okay, well, we'll keep,
Well, maybe I'll answer. Sandy has another question there about her safari. So maybe I can speak to that one first. She's considering, wants to see Cape Town. A vaccination rate is low, but wanted to get your thoughts. What I do, as I said, when I'm thinking about where I'm comfortable traveling, is I think about what I do at home, what I'm comfortable doing here, and if I can do those things abroad. You know, are people masking? What do you want to see in Cape Town? Are there museums you want to go to? Do people have to wear their masks when they enter those museums? Are they limiting occupancy? Are they making people show proof of vaccination? You know, do you want to go wine tasting? Or do the wineries have outdoor bars set up where you can sit outside and taste the wine? So that's kind of the process that I'm using to decide what feels safe to me. And yes, South Africa and Botswana, Africa as a whole, vaccination rates are really trailing there, which is a responsibility for all of us around the world to improve on. And so it's important to know that you're going to be in parts of the country where you are outdoors and socially distanced. And you can also talk to the person planning your trip and find out. I bet that the staff at your lodges will be the first in line to get vaccinated. I know many African countries are also prioritizing vaccination. When I was in Zimbabwe this summer, everyone in the town of Victoria Falls had been vaccinated. And to see Victoria Falls with no one else there, literally, I was there for an hour and there were 5 other people there. I'd been there about 10 years ago and it was just a mob scene. And it was incredible to be there alone this time. Billy, are you back with us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I don't know what happened. So about Egypt, yes, I felt safe. I felt especially safe on the boat because it was a small dahabeya, which I would recommend. I don't know if I would have enjoyed the larger Nile cruise boats or felt safe on them. We saw a lot of them pass and they looked pretty enclosed. They had a big deck on the top, but a lot of them weren't covered, and it's sun is really bright in Egypt, so it didn't seem like the kind of place you'd want to spend the whole day, which is whereas on our boat, it was covered and it was just the most pleasant place to hang out. So I felt really safe there. In the city, so in Cairo is a little bit of a mixed bag. The city it's not an outdoor city. There aren't really outdoor restaurants, but at the hotels, there was always a place to eat outside. We sit at the Four Seasons and on the Nile, and we ate outside by the pool, and that was lovely. And every hotel I stayed in had a balcony or big windows that opened. Even the boat had big windows that opened. So that felt safe. I think the only place that I didn't feel great was the museum in Cairo, the Cairo Museum. It's like the main museum right now where all the artifacts are, and it's a great history lesson to give you context before you go out and see all the temples and tombs in real life. And it was pretty mobbed because it's where all the tour groups go, even though we went at a time, trying to avoid them. But 2 things that made it okay is, one, I didn't feel comfortable, so I just left. Like, it wasn't like I was trapped, I just went outside. And 2, that won't even be a problem because they're building this beautiful new museum, the Grand Egyptian Museum, the GEM, as it's being called, and it's huge. Like, we drove by it. It took like 20 minutes to drive by it. It's huge. So when that opens, and that's expected in 2022, so it'll probably be open by the time you get there, you won't have that issue. And then you can also determine your comfort level as you're walking into tombs. By nature, right there, they're small spaces. You can walk down all the steps to get into these enclosed spaces. I didn't run into any of them where I felt that I was I wasn't with anyone. Like there were maybe one or two other tourists because our guide knew when to go to these places to avoid the groups. So that was easy. But again, if for some reason you are there at a peak moment, you can just wait for the group to leave and go in after them. So everything was really manageable. I felt like there were options even if I had run into situations, but I didn't run into situations. So I felt really safe, and I would absolutely recommend it.
I would just say the experience I had in Turkey that was sort of similar to Billy's moment of like, wait, I don't want to be here, was the only place in Istanbul where I felt like, wait, is this safe? Was inside the mosques, the Blue Mosque and the Hagia Sophia. While I was in there and I was fine and I didn't get sick, there were times when, you would get close to other people and it was feeling stuffy, and there were people like tour groups from Russia who weren't wearing masks. But you would then try to stay as far from those people as you could. So there were a couple of mosques where it started to feel kind of, but the thing is you could leave easily, or you could go, if people started crowding near you, you could go to a part of the mosque that was emptier. Or you could just go to a different mosque. I left and went to the Suleimani Mosque, which is my favorite one anyway, and it was very empty, and also has wonderful open air courtyards and everything. The point is, there's always a solution, if you're starting to feel a little bit nervous, if you get into a situation like that. Have we answered all of the questions?
Yeah, I feel like we win a Zoom prize. We somehow got through the whole Q&A.
Is that even possible?
Right at 8 o'clock.
First time.
I will say, I'll just add, just following on this topic of feeling comfortable, it's just one of your guides, the best guides, will know how to navigate those situations, and they'll have alternatives like other mosques, or my guide said, we can leave now, we can come back to the museum later. So if you have, if you have a good guide, if you have a really plugged in, trip planner who knows what's on the ground, they can help you with that. So that'll help you feel safe. And what I want to say is, I just also recommend is just be in constant communication especially with your guide. Talk to them, tell them how you're feeling. I said to my guide, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this. And so he tried one thing, and then 5 minutes later, I was like, you know what? It's okay. I'm just going to go outside. Had I waited and just suffered through, he couldn't have fixed it. If you talk to them and they understand your comfort level, they can fix it right then. And that was day one. Throughout the trip, he would check in with me about things. How are you feeling about this? How are you feeling like that? And I really appreciated that. So, never be afraid to say something or ask for something, especially in these times, because the guys want to know, they want to help, and they can. So, and also with your wildest planner before the trip, tell them what your concerns are so that they can give you the answers, and help you evaluate how comfortable you can be.
Just a couple of other questions I see here. Barbara is still asking about global entry renewal. I actually, I sent the website, go to cbp.gov, Customs and Border Patrol. That's where to renew your global entry. Also, there's a question here about, what about Morocco? I just want to say, I think Morocco is one of the best places you could be going, because it's all open air. I mean, I can't even really think of any site to see there that's enclosed, that doesn't have open windows or isn't out in the open. It's like one big outdoor museum, Morocco. And also the way the hotels are, like in Marrakesh, in a lot of the layout of the hotels, it's like it'll be a resort with lots of little riads, little bungalows. You're in your own standalone riad or standalone little bungalow or villa at so many hotels. And so and you eat all your meals outdoors. So it's actually very easy to stay safe in Morocco right now. I think it's a great option. Oh, and I see that somebody else was in Georgia last month and it was fantastic. I'm so glad. I was thinking very seriously about going to Georgia and probably will in 2022. Are there any other questions we want to try to answer? Brooke, did you see any others that came up?
A few came in. One asked about safety in Mexico, given they're not screening. So yes, Mexico is one of the few countries. Dominican Republic is another one where you do not need anything, proof of anything to enter. And I think, we can't decide what's going to be safe for you, but that is definitely a factor to consider versus going to Italy, where everyone has to prove that they're vaccinated before they get on the plane. Know that you're flying to Mexico, if you fly there, with a plane load of people who have not necessarily been recently tested, only by choice if they do. And I have seen travelers who have decided not to be vaccinated, who are choosing destinations preferentially that do not require tests or vaccination, obviously. So know that that's kind of attractive to people who are preferring not to be tested or vaccinated. But once you're there in Mexico, in many places you can be, on your own, have a private villa, socially distanced on the beach, and lots of outdoor restaurants. Quick answer, I see, is Uruguay open to tourists? It is, yes. And go to our article for entry details. Yes, it is an option for the holidays.
And I think that would be an awesome idea. And again, if you go to WendyPerrin.com, go to just click on Ask Wendy or click on Get a Personalized Trip Recommendation, and we'll tell you the best way to do that. Looks like we've gone over time yet again, but I'm glad we got to so many questions. What an accomplishment. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining us. A huge thanks to Billy and Brooke. What a great team. So knowledgeable, and it is just isn't it a relief and so wonderful to be able to talk about travel again and how joyful it can be. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining us, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving next week and a very happy holiday season. If we can help you out with any more travel questions or with any trip plans, again, just go to Get a Personalized Trip Recommendation at WendyPerrin.com and send it our way. Thanks so much for joining us. Take good care. Happy holidays.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.